Everyone, and welcome to a late Saturday edition of Words, Images, and Worlds. It's actually late Saturday where I am. I'm talking with Sylvie Kantorovitz. Sylvie, how are you today or this evening, wherever you happen to be in the world?
It's this evening for me too. We're in the same time zone, and I'm well,
Wonderful,
thank you.
wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much for joining me, and also thank you for adjusting the time for me, uh, and being flexible in finding a time to talk.
No problem.
I Oh, thank you. I encountered your graphic novel memoir, which is called Sylvie. Very, very appropriate title. Sometime over the past couple of years, I think I got a copy from Candlewick. I think they sent it to me for a blog that I was working on, and I believe that you have been featured on the blog. We did a written interview, so it's nice to actually. I believe we did. Yeah, once upon a time.
Is it possible? I forget. Oh, but I'm
We,
glad. I'm glad you're
yes.
reminding me of that.
Yeah, and it's nice to talk to you in person and via audio now. So, what was it about comics that attracted you to the medium?
So, first of all, the fact that I grew up in France probably had a little bit to do with it because when I was growing up, comics were part of life. Um, they were not badly considered at all. In my family, which was a family that read a lot of books of all kinds, comics were also there. So my dad, who was an academic, also loved to read comics. So whenever there would be a new Asterix or Tintin or Lucky Luke in the house, um, everybody was happy. We lined up to be the next one to read them. So the form already felt very familiar to me from childhood. There was nothing unusual about it. Um, However, I didn't start thinking of doing comics until later. I started my career being a children's picture book illustrator. And in fact, I was thinking of myself primarily as an illustrator, not a creator of words and images. Um, I realized doing that work that I really enjoyed telling as much as I could with images. And even when I turned to writing picture books myself, I favored few words and lots of stories through the visuals.
Mhm.
Um, but I didn't see myself as a comic book creator. Even though I enjoyed reading them when they became very popular, I couldn't get enough of them. The idea of the amount of work each one of those involved was just didn't seem to match my way of working. It seemed very daunting. You can imagine there are hundreds of little images in each one of them. So I didn't see myself doing that. But what happened is at some point I felt like having a change in my artwork. And I gave myself a challenge, which also was popular at the time of social media explosion, which was why don't I do a drawing a day? I forced myself, was not a hard forcing, it was a pleasure, but I give myself the challenge of doing one new drawing every morning and posting it online just to see where that takes me. And doing that exercise over many months, a lot of themes emerged. And one thing that emerged was a little character that I ended up calling Suzette. And for some reason, that little character, among all the trees, abstract flowers, all kinds of things. But there was that little funky looking character um, wanted a story and wanted a story in comics. It's not like I had a conversation with that character, but I just it just triggered something in my mind. So I switched from having a challenge of one drawing a day to having a challenge of one comic page every few days. So about 1 to 2 pages per week. That was my challenge. And I started the story of this little Suzette. And the story turned out to be a sort of memoir. And I kept up with it for a while. Because of the feedback of the internet, which for me was not even that many people, but there's still a feedback when a few of your friends say, hey, I saw your drawing, that was really cute, I want to see more. It still makes you want to do more. So I kept up with it for about, I would say, a little over 100 pages. And then it proved two things to me. It proved, one, I could do it. I could sustain a visual project over more than the 32 to 48 pages that a picture book usually is. I could really go for a long time. And the second thing that it proved to me was that I loved doing it. I really loved telling a story through that medium. And that's how it started. So then I switched gear and I thought, okay, I'm going to do something for my work this way. And that's when I started to work on Sylvie per se. Even though it wasn't called Sylvie in those days, I refrained from calling it Sylvie because I was not thinking it would be a memoir, but that's how it started. Yeah.
Did it go through multiple drafts and iterations from that process
Oh my
starting out?
goodness. The amount of work, I'm glad I didn't know before I started how much work and revisions were going to be involved. And they were all important. I'm very grateful to both agent and editors who geared me towards those revisions because the work kept getting stronger and stronger. So not, I am not complaining, but
Mm.
boy, did it have a lot of versions. I think at some point I was at 11, and
Oh, wow.
some of them were small changes, but some of them were complete reshuffling of chapters and pages. It was interesting. It was a very interesting process. Yeah.
Mm. So I am also a lover of the picture book medium. I don't know quite as much about it.
Okay.
Um, and I know that I've talked with several folks who say, I took on a graphic novel after picture books, and their words line up with your experiences very well, the sheer volume
Mhm.
of material. So, what do those media allow you to do as a storyteller? You're welcome to talk about your work in picture books as well as graphic novels. I want to make sure that we capture.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah, that's a good point. That for me, picture books was often a mini graphic novel because even though the words were not necessarily in a bubble, the words were often what the character was saying anyway. So I often read them as, or the ones I wrote to me read as mini graphic novels. But when you ask that question, what comes to my mind is the name of your podcast,
mm,
words, images, and worlds. And I think that's one of the things that graphic novels and the visuals aspect of the graphic novels allows is that as soon as you open a page, you're plunging in a new world.
mm,
um, you don't have to read anything, you just have to look. You see a landscape, you see a cityscape, you know where you are right away. Then you see right away who's going to be in there, the characters.
mhm,
Through the facial expressions, you can see maybe what they're feeling like through their body posture. Through the lighting, maybe you can get some kind of an atmosphere of what it's going to be. It's very much like a movie. A
mhm,
movie
mhm,
starts and you're right in there. I think a graphic novel starts and it's very similar. You're right in there, inside of the book. Um, of course, one of the things I enjoy is because I write for young readers. And I remember when I was a young reader, I devoured books. But even though I was a big reader, I preferred dialogues. I couldn't wait for that part of the page where you could see that the dialogue was coming, or that the action was happening, or that the character was thinking things. And whenever there was a long description of landscape or house, or and in school we had to read a lot of those books with endless descriptions. It was a slog.
mhm,
I was eager to get over that. Graphic novels, there's none of that. You get all the information, all the visual information that would take so much to describe in words is right
mhm.
there. So I think that's, to me, that's the main advantage of graphic novels. But there is another thing, is that the thought balloons. I really like the thought balloons. So
Hmm.
in Sylvie, I would say that one of the themes of Sylvie is very much how she evolves from a young girl to a high school girl,
Hmm.
and we see her changing in all kinds of things, including her thought process. So all along in the bubbles that look like thought bubbles, we know what she's thinking about, what's going on around her. And I think I was that kind of a person who kept my thoughts to myself. I did not look for confrontations or argument, but you could tell through the thought that maybe sometimes I did not enjoy what was going on around me. So I think that's what I tried to make Sylvie be, a thoughtful person, and you can see that through her thought bubbles. Yeah,
That's one of the intriguing aspects of graphic novels too, because you can have a character looking like what they're thinking. You can have a
yeah,
character who's thinking something, but their interactions don't necessarily show that. And it's
that's
just such
right.
a unique thing.
That's right. That's right. The visuals and the words can actually sometimes uh, contradict each other, and the
Hmm.
reader gets a complete different. If you were just reading the words, you might get an impression, but the reader who sees the pictures might get a totally different impression. That's really, yeah, I love that. Which is actually an advantage over the movie. I just
Hmm.
this is just something I just thought about. Yeah,
And you can go inside the mind of a character in such a more clear and distinct way than in a movie. You can have voiceover in a movie, but it's just not quite the same.
and it's not as common. That's right. That's right. Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
I am also I grew up on superhero comics, but I love the graphic novel memoir. And I love the aspect of your work that it's written with younger audiences in mind, but it's not necessarily only to be enjoyed by a younger audience. It could be enjoyed by middle grades, young adult, adult, anyone who wants to sort of journey into the mind and exploration of this child who also happens to be a representation of your experiences. So, what was it about the graphic novel memoir? Are there parts of the story itself that you would like to share for readers?
Well, first of all, thank you for what you're saying about the age group that is reading that, because it
Hmm.
is true, very true, that it is described in whatever description the publisher has created as a book for, I think it says 9 to 14. I could be wrong, but it's probably 9 to 14. And I have heard from parents of 6-year-old who read the book, and
Hmm.
adults who love to read the book, and absolutely all the ages in between. So it has been quite interesting to see the variety of people enjoying this. So that's
Hmm.
been very rewarding to me. So I think your question was, what was
Things
the
that sorry, things I sort of rambled through it a bit. Things that you would want to share with readers about the graphic novel memoir aspect of the book.
right? Well, I can say how I went about it, because the funny thing that I was not planning on writing a memoir. I having grown up in France and living in America, I know that Americans are often interested in what happens in another country.
Mhm.
I am myself always interested in how other people live in other countries. So here I had I could draw on my experience, and I was thinking I'm going to draw on my experience to write the book about a young girl living in France. It's not going to be me. I'm going to call her Lisette, so that gives me some distance, and I can invent. And the reason I wanted to do it this way was because I could not believe I would remember enough on one hand, and I could not believe my life had been that interesting on another hand. I didn't have any big trauma in my childhood, and it seemed like a pretty normal upbringing. So I thought, well, I will invent things to make it more interesting, right?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
I will invent things when I don't remember. And this is what happened. I worked and worked, and as I worked, memories kept triggering memories,
Hmm.
anecdotes kept coming in my mind to such a point that even though I still thought I was writing about Lisette, I never invented anything. It was entirely drawn from my actual memories. So when I submitted it to an agent, I had to look for an agent, and that took a while. But an agent was interested in the story. But at some point, the agent made me work on some things, and at some point, my agent said, "Wait a minute, you have to make up your mind. Is this fiction or is this a memoir? I need to know in order to present it to an editor." And I gave it some thought. And at first, I was going to jump in and say, "No, no, no, it's not. It's not a memoir. You know, it's a little bit intimidating to talk about yourself and to have yourself exposed like that." But I didn't respond right away. I mulled it over, and I thought, well, obviously, I tweaked things here and there because, for example, a common tweak is to use many friends and to make just one friend of many friends. Otherwise, it's too many people, and you can lose the thread of the story. So I tweaked a few things here and there, but everything was really true.
Hmm. Hmm.
If not true entirely factually, it was true emotionally. Everything was drawn from a memory of emotions I had when I was growing up. So I felt pretty confident telling her, this is a memoir. You can go ahead and present it as a memoir. That's what it is, and there it is. So I made up my mind that way. It was still called Lisette for a long time, even with the editor. And I mean, at some point, everything was set. We had the whole work done. And she said, "Okay, we need to work on the title." And we worked on the title, and the title kept changing from French girl to all kinds of other things. And then one day she came up and said, "We're going to call this Sylvie. How's that with you?" And again, it was, I had that shyness about it. I felt so
Hmm.
exposed. And I thought, no, you're right. That is a great title. And so that's only at that point that all the Lisette name left and my real name showed up in the book. And so I don't know if I'm following exactly what you said, but this is how I worked on my memoir. And to me, I think what happened with writing a memoir was to realize that all lives are interesting, even the lives that do not have an unbelievable or dramatic beginning. Every life contains dilemmas, every life contains problems to solve, people to deal with, people to interact with. So I think when I read a memoir, I want to see how people deal with their daily life, how they solve problems, how they evolve over time. So that Sylvie, we see her evolving over time. So I realized that the interest is not in my book anyways, the interest is not in the extraordinary, it is in what everybody can probably recognize. The times when Sylvie doesn't fit in, because I lived Jewish in a world that was all Catholic. So there was that idea of not fitting in. It was, even though there was no big drama about it, there was dealing with a mother who was very demanding. I'm sure a lot of kids are dealing with, wanting to please their parents.
Hmm.
Um, there were classmates who were maybe acting not optimally, uh,
That
that kind of
happens.
thing. So the memoir made me realize that all lives are interesting, and that the important thing for me was to remember who I was, because who I was then helped me to realize who I am now. And that to me, that's like an obsession. Who am I? What am I in this world? What does it mean for me to be here? That's a personal obsession, but so we don't need to get into that. But the writing the memoir did help me with that. Yeah.
Wonderful. And I think that question, I'm sure there are people that don't ask themselves that, but I think that's a very universal question. I think a lot of us, if we were honest, we asked ourselves that question at some point in our lives, or maybe all through our lives. So I love that your book speaks to that. I love that it speaks to your personal journey, uh, and I love that it's this book of sort of traveling and growing up in your family. I was, of course, attracted to it at first because it's a graphic novel, and I love to read graphic novels. But then when I saw it was Sylvie by Sylvie Kantorovitz, I thought, well, it's great because I love to read the stories of people. And what a great message that we all have stories to share.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. I like to give folks the chance to talk about upcoming events, upcoming work. Absolutely recommend checking out your book Sylvie, as well as your picture books. But any other works or projects that you'd like to share about before we conclude?
So my next book is going to come out next spring, and I think in the world of publishing, spring is something around something like January and February. I'm not sure of the exact date, so it's going to be a while before it comes out. Unsurprisingly, it is also in comics form. I think I am
Great.
completely hooked. That's it for me. I just love to tell stories that way. Um, that's how I found out who I am too, right? And,
Mm-hmm.
it's going to be a chapter book. You would call it a chapter book. So not so many pages. I think it's about 60 pages. It will be for middle grade, early middle grade. It takes place in a little village that is called Pocketville and looks like a little, even though it's called an American name, it looks very much like my favorite area of France where I grew up, rolling hills, countryside. It's cartoony though. It's not realistically. I like to draw cartoony, but it's a cute little village. The inhabitants are animals, and the main character is a little mole. His name is Monty, and Monty is very set in his ways. He's kind of shy, and we're gonna see Monty Mole getting out of his comfort zone
Oh,
and
nice, nice.
and having to speak up because there's a newcomer in the village and not everybody is welcoming. So I'm not
Very
going to
nice.
say more than that, but I'm quite pleased with that story of mine. Yeah.
I'm looking forward to it. Looking forward to it. And it
Thank
sounds
you.
like you've got some allegory or at least some symbolism working in there, some lovely animal characters to enjoy. And I also enjoy your style as well. Um,
Thank you. Thank you.
mhm.
Uh,
Is will that also be from Chronicle or is that a new
it's with
publisher?
the same house. Yeah. It's
Okay.
not Chronicle. It's Candlewick.
Candlewick, I'm sorry.
It's
Candlewick,
okay.
yes.
I wouldn't
Yeah.
mind doing with Chronicle, but it's Candlewick. It's an imprint of Candlewick that's Walker US.
All right. I am jotting it down and I'll be looking for it. Um, And yeah, looking forward to that. And that's also the wonderful thing about graphic novels is that you can go back and enjoy them. So I'm sure I'll be revisiting Sylvie many times. And I hope that you, Sylvie, also come back on at some point to talk about your new book and many more books to come.
That would be with pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jason. It was lovely talking with you.
Great to talk with you as well.